Welcome to Lesson 7a, Introduction to Irrotational Flow. In this lesson, we'll define the irrotational flow, or potential flow, approximation. We'll introduce velocity potential and stream function, and I'll discuss various solution techniques. By introduction, from mathematics, you may recall, for any vector A, if del cross A, in other words the curl of A, is 0, then A can be written as the gradient of some scalar function, which I'll call phi here. Phi is called the potential function, and as I said, it's a scalar. In fluid flow, let A equal the velocity vector. Thus, if del cross U is 0, U can be written as the gradient of phi, where phi is the velocity potential function, or most people simply say the velocity potential. Recall that since omega, the vorticity, is del cross U, then this implies irrotational flow. Because we have this velocity potential, irrotational flow is also called potential flow. I'll use these two terms interchangeably. One thing you may have noticed, we said nothing about compressibility, viscosity, two-dimensionality, or unsteadiness. This concept of the velocity potential comes from pure mathematics. So if the flow is irrotational, then U is the gradient of phi. The flow would still be a potential flow if it's irrotational, regardless of whether it's compressible, viscous, three-dimensional, even unsteady. Now let's talk about the equations of motion for 2D incompressible irrotational flow. We'll restrict our discussion and analysis to this simplified flow. Let's look at the velocity potential. We just said that if the flow is irrotational, U is del phi, and for two-dimensional flow, the components are U equal del phi del x and V equal del phi del y. This condition comes from irrotationality. We can also apply continuity for the incompressible flow case, del U del x plus del V del y equals 0. Plugging in these expressions for U and V, we get del squared phi del x squared plus del squared phi del y squared equals 0. You may recognize this as the 2D Laplacian of phi. We'll just call this del squared phi equals 0 since we're limiting ourselves to 2D flow. Now consider the stream function. Recall that we can define the stream function psi by its derivatives, U equal del psi del y and V equal negative del psi del x. But by definition of vorticity, omega is del cross U. For a 2D flow, omega z is the only non-zero component, and omega z is del v del x minus del u del y. Similar to what we did up here, we substitute for u and for v from these expressions. We get omega z is negative del squared psi del x squared minus del squared psi del y squared. Again, recognizing the 2D Laplacian, we see that del squared psi is minus omega z. This equation is valid for 2D incompressible rotational flow. But here we approximate the flow as irrotational. I do want to emphasize this word approximate. Irrotational flow is an approximation. It breaks down when viscous effects lead to rotationality. But when the flow is irrotational, this equation reduces to del squared psi equals 0. For 2D incompressible irrotational flow, since omega is 0 everywhere for an irrotational flow. Thus, this term is 0. We notice something interesting here. We have the 2D Laplace equation for phi, and we have the 2D Laplace equation for psi. And the velocity components u and v are expressed either in terms of psi or in terms of phi. Thus, we can make this statement. If you can solve Laplace's equation for either psi or phi, you can generate the velocity field. In other words, solve del squared phi equals 0 or del squared psi equals 0. Then u equal del phi del x, or u equal del psi del y, and v equal del psi del y, or v equal negative del psi del x. We can solve for the velocity field by solving either for phi or for psi. Here's a question then. What is the role of the Navier-Stokes equation?
I guess we don't need it then, dude.
Well, Joe, that's true for the velocity field. Navier-Stokes is not needed to find the velocity field, but sometimes we need more than just velocity. What else do we often solve for?
I think it might be needed to solve for the pressure.
That's right, Arnold. Navier-Stokes is needed to solve for the pressure field.
Cool.
For our restrictions, 2D incompressible irrotational flow, the Navier-Stokes equation reduces to the Euler equation, where all the viscous terms have disappeared due to the irrotationality, as we've discussed in a previous lesson. If we integrate Euler's equation, we get the Bernoulli equation, as we've also done in a previous lesson. If the flow is unsteady, the Bernoulli equation takes the form del phi del t plus p over rho plus v squared over 2, where this is a capital V, the magnitude of the two velocity components. And if gravity is important, we add gz, and this is a function of time. This is the unsteady Bernoulli equation. We would use this to calculate p of x, y, and t for an unsteady problem. We'll be talking only about steady flow, so the unsteady term here and the function of time here disappear. In other words, if f is not a function of time, it must be a constant. So we get p over rho plus v squared over 2 plus gz equal constant. And this constant is the same everywhere in the flow. This is the form of the Bernoulli equation that we all know and love, which I call the beloved Bernoulli equation. It applies for steady irrotational flow. Now I want to give a quick overview of the solution techniques for incompressible irrotational flow. First, what I'll call the straightforward approach, using real variables. With this technique, we pick either phi or psi as our unknown, specify boundary conditions on phi or psi for our flow of interest. Then we solve Laplace's equation for phi or psi. When we're finally done, we solve for the velocity components u and v, and then we apply Bernoulli to solve for pressure. This is the straightforward, logical approach, and it looks simple, but solving Laplace's equation is not trivial analytically, except for very simple flow geometries. So this step usually requires a computer. I comment here that if we're using this technique, we typically use psi rather than phi, because it is easier to generate boundary conditions. It turns out that psi is constant along walls, for example, and psi is also constant along any streamline. So once we solve for psi, we can plot our streamlines as well. The second way to solve this is what I'll call the inverse approach. We pick a function phi or psi that satisfies the Laplace equation. Then we work backwards to see what flow it represents. This is an inverse approach because we start with just a function and find out what flow it represents, rather than having a flow in mind and solving for phi or psi from that flow field. For example, let's pick psi equals some constant times theta. But what does this flow represent? Well, in our 2D plane, and since we're using cylindrical coordinates, we use the r theta coordinate system. What do the streamlines look like? Well, we see that if psi is constant, which it is along a streamline, for some constant c, psi is just a constant times theta. In other words, lines of constant psi are lines of constant theta. If theta is some constant value, for example here about 40 degrees, then psi would be some constant times that theta value, which we would write in radians. So what kind of flow is this? Well, if we pick different values of angle theta, lines of constant psi, or streamlines, are rays from the origin. We call this flow a line source. There's a discontinuity at the origin, but other than that, the flow just moves out radially in all directions. I do want to quickly show the Laplace equation in cylindrical coordinates, namely del squared psi is 1 over r del del r of r del psi del r plus 1 over r squared del squared psi del theta squared equals 0. This, of course, is for 2D flow. This equation will be needed in some future work, but I just wanted to show here that when psi equal constant times theta, psi is not a function of r, and when you take the second derivative with respect to theta, it goes to 0. So we see that psi equal constant times theta does indeed satisfy the Laplace equation. A third technique is superposition using real variables. This is also an inverse approach, since we don't start out with a given flow. Rather, we'll add up existing solutions. Superposition works because the Laplace equation is linear and homogeneous. That simply means that the right-hand side is 0. For example, if we're working with psi, the 2D Laplacian is equal to 0 on the right-hand side. So it's homogeneous. It's also linear, since the coefficients of these terms are not functions of psi itself. In fact, here they're just 1, but they could be other constants or functions of x and y, and this equation would still be linear. Superposition is valid for linear, homogeneous differential equations. What it means is that if psi1 is a solution of a Laplace equation, and if psi2 is a solution of the Laplace equation, then psi equals some constant times psi1 plus some other constant times psi2 is also a solution of the Laplace equation. This is the concept of superposition. Note that we could do the same thing with phi rather than psi, but as I said, we generally use psi in these problems because of the boundary conditions and being able to plot the streamlines easily. We'll talk about superposition in more detail in the next couple lessons. For now, I'll just say that with superposition, we can add up building block flows, where psi1 and psi2 would be building blocks. For example, the line source that we just talked about, plus some other known solution, and when we add them together, we're guaranteed that the sum will be also a solution. A and B, by the way, can be any constants. The fourth solution technique is solutions using complex variables. Everything we've done so far, u, v, p, psi, and phi, are all real variables, but it turns out to be convenient to work in complex variables. We'll discuss this in more detail in the next lesson. Thank you for watching this video. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel for more videos.
1, 2, 3.